Real talk. The show's been dipping. Fewer listens, lower growth. I caught myself thinking, am I failing you? I remembered one thing, that this is not the finish line. This is merely practice. Today, I'm turning that dip into a system that you can use too. Welcome to How to Make Failure a Trigger for the habit that gets you moving again. Good day to you all, and welcome to Bad Day Excellence, the podcast where we turn those tough days into opportunities for growth. I'm Brian Walsh, an optimist with over a decade of experience in marketing, leadership, and personal transformation. In that time, I have shed more than 100 pounds, run a marathon, wrote a book, and worked with some of the most inspiring people I have ever met. I'm here to help you build habits that create clarity, success, and a meaningful life, even when life feels a little chaotic. Every week, we dive into the art of habit formation and how you can apply it to your career, parenting, relationships, and beyond. Ready to turn a bad day into your next breakthrough? Let's get started. I have spent most of my life as the king of Mount Stupid on the Dunning Kruger effect initial peak. For those of you who are new to the Dunning Kruger effect, it is a very simple graph where the x-axis is your competency. This is the knowledge level you have on a current topic. And then the y-axis is your confidence level. If we follow along the graph, what ends up happening is we start at zero, confidence and competence. But soon as we learn a little bit something new, our confidence tends to shoot up and skyrocket into levels that can only be equated with Steve Jobs, Jeff Bezos, or Alex Hormozi, right? Like all of a sudden we are ready. We can tackle anything, but it's short-lived. Remember, we only scratch the surface. We only have a little bit of competence. We only learned just a smidge. Whether we meet an opposing opinion from an authority in the space we're entering, or we take a shot at launching a new product or business or project in an effort to show how amazing we are, life has this habit of pulling the rug out from under us, and we find ourselves quickly falling flat on our face into something that is called the valley of despair. These moments are often the pivotal moments where people will abandon their pursuit or pivot into something else, but not me. In fact, I once taught myself how to ski by flinging myself down a bunny slope, falling head over heels the whole way down. And I just consistently got up, fall down, get up, fall down, get up, and just learned and iterated. Now, mind you, this was when I was highly malleable. I was probably about 10 years old. If I did this today, I would absolutely need to be airlifted out of there after the first fall, because obviously, I'm 41 now, and my body doesn't work like that anymore, or bend like that. But by the end of the day of learning to ski, I was on the intermediate slopes. In fact, while I was on the intermediate slopes, I'm all by myself. I fell once, and if someone were to watch it happen, one would think they were watching Goofy from those old school cartoons where he would fall and become a ball, and then all of a sudden magically everything fades away and he's perfectly fine still skiing. That was me. This path to true competency on the Dunning-Kruger effect is called the slope of enlightenment. So once we fall this slope, we kind of begin to grow in our confidence because now we're starting to learn. We're iterating, we're learning, we're taking it cautiously. And the slope is not exponential. It's definitely just a little wavy. And a lot of times I'll even say that I'll fail and go backwards a little bit. Like I'll challenge a perception or push myself to the edge and find that, okay, this is not the path. I need to kind of go back and try another way. I mentioned in the beginning that I had a thought or two that I was failing you all. Yes, podcast numbers are down, and yet I can't stop. Last week, I attended a conference. This conference was about AI. and I was with a number of my coworkers. Now, I'm a remote worker, so I don't actually get to see them very often. And so it was wonderful to reconnect in a personal space. One of my colleagues grabbed me and was curious and started asking how my podcast was. And also, like, how do I come up with ideas each week? I gave her a quick answer and added a very gracious thank you for her interest that, you know, I just can't believe that someone would be interested. She did mention that she doesn't listen, but she sees my posts. And so it was enough to be intriguing. But then that cascaded into additional questions. She was wondering how I got everything done every week and other productivity questions that she was just intrigued about. It wasn't necessarily about the podcast itself, but about the process and about the ability that I can maintain my day-to-day job, as well as come and deliver this podcast on a weekly basis. Took a beat because I was blushing because she even grabbed others to the conversation, and I couldn't believe that she said, "Oh, did you know Brian does a podcast?" I was like, "Stop." Like I'm like so nervous because again, I'm going through this idea that, hey, my numbers are down. Like maybe the content isn't good. During this conversation, I mentioned that I have this thing that I call maniacal intention. This is an extreme focus and filtering of actions that I utilize to not always chase the shiny ball syndrome or even to burn out. Kind of like the Panama Canal that has these channel locks, right? These little gates. I have these gates that each idea or initiative has to pass through before I act. And the very first one is a very easy one. It's the rule of 100. I do not start anything unless I am willing to do 100 times. Get in 100 reps. Or do it for 100 days. This allows me to climb Mount Stupid and fall to the Valley of Despair and begin to crawl my way up the slope of enlightenment. I will not abandon my journey unless I truly battle tested myself. One big tip that I actually really want to share with you all is that over time, I've learned to, instead of climb so large and so high in that confidence, I've learned to find smaller peaks that I can fail faster and transfer that energy towards my slope of enlightenment. My sons absolutely roll their eyes because I repeat over and over again. You learn more from failure than you do success. So it's time to walk you through my system to redirect this energy from a negative experience of shame to a positive experience towards my goal of helping 9.5 million people. I can't say this enough. Everything you do is a habit. Trigger, action, prize. Tap loop, man. This is so simple. Your behavior is based upon life experiences and reinforcement of that behavior with prize over and over again. Whenever you find yourself feeling stuck or just failed in a fantastic fashion in front of everyone you know, you need to take this as a trigger for reflection. This is the first step. I have two things that I do when I reflect. Let's start at the first question. Why did you start this in the first place? Establishing a good why from the start. And we're not talking about, I want to make $1 million or I want to be YouTube famous. No, we're talking about a deeper purpose. This is the cornerstone to build out that resilience on your journey. I started my podcast to work on my public speaking and my communication skills, which this will help me guide and motivate others in the future. Then we move on to question 2. What are some wins and what are some lessons learned? I have now released 36 episodes, including this one today that you're listening to. That's 1/3 done towards my 100 reps. 1/3! It's crazy. I've learned more about storytelling, leadership, neuroscience, and wealth because I've been researching it for this podcast to share with you all. I've embraced the power of the pause. So instead of rambling with every response, I allow my racing thoughts to get in line and take a number. The first podcast I was a guest star on, I found myself taking 5 to 10 minutes to answer a question. Today, I utilize frameworks and my past experiences to create clarity in my head and share value with answers that allow opportunities to explore deeper or move on. The last win I will share with you all is my lack of fear when it comes to showing my face on camera. Yes, it has been harder to record a video podcast and edit it, but with more reps, I get more and more comfortable with my delivery. Once you've completed your reflection, you can't help but laugh at the idea that you doubt yourself. I mean, I'm smiling ear to ear because I'm like, oh my God, are you kidding me? I've done all of this and it hasn't even been a full year. I feel energy building in my stomach, and that begins to force its way up into my heart. It's rocket fuel. The engines are started, and it's almost time to hit the launch button. My next step after the reflection is to determine and execute a tiny win. An internal combustion engine, if we're talking about rocket fuel and everything, an internal combustion engine starts the whole chain reaction with just this tiny little spark plug and just like little tiny spark, and then boom, pistons move and energy is transferred, and it's amazing. It's crazy to think about how this whole process happens and gets kicked off by just such a small, tiny spark. And then all of a sudden you're moving at breakneck speeds. Now, obviously, I'm no rocket scientist. I'm pretty sure, there's probably more to it. But I know this is how it works in the car. And trust me, when my wife hits the pedal, it's breakneck speeds. I'd like to say that this episode was my tiny spark to continue this movement. But actually, it was talking with this gentleman yesterday. His handle is Sleepy Dog Creative. His name is Jeremiah. And I met him on TikTok. His story and storytelling touched my heart, and it was amazing. I loved watching it and found myself almost looking in the mirror. His journey has ups and downs, and he is so talented. And I reached out to him, and all I want to do is help him. There's a list on my wall over here. These are a list of rules that we live by in this house. And rule number 2 states, the Walshes lift others when we are down. Too often, we feel like crabs in a bucket. When one of the crabs will climb, the others will pull it down, trying to climb back out. And with this rule, it reminds us to lift the others and push them to the area where they're reaching. And then maybe, just maybe, they'll reach out their hand and help us too. Jeremiah walked me through his story and his why. He too is in the valley of despair. Together, we decided to begin to work together to lift each other up and climb. Jeremiah isn't the only one. John from the Engaged Father Project has not only guided me to become a more present and loving father to my children, but we both are climbing together, sharing our lessons learned in order to build our own coaching businesses. Amanda from Operation Phoenix, who was on last week's podcast, is another rock star who wants to help companies build environments of trust and meaningful work. We are momentum makers. And by working with them, I have found my people. So if you aren't sure what to do for your spark to move forward, I highly suggest you go out and you help someone. I'm not saying you need to move mountains. I am, however, saying lean into them. Just show interest. Ask how they're doing. Let them open up to you. and just listen and push those positive vibes they need to keep moving forward. So we've reflected, we've found our tiny spark to light our journey through the slope of enlightenment. What's next? My last step is establishing the ladder of failure. My book, Habitcraft 101, I have this acronym called the Spark Cycle. Spark stands for simple, prompted, acted, rewarded, and kept. It's simple. We've already identified that we need a simple bite-sized action. This will help keep you moving, and what's really important is to stay consistent and protect the time to execute this action like your life depends on it. Prompt it. We need to identify areas in your environment, identify and create these triggers that will help us remind us to stay vigilant in this action. This will make it so much easier to be successful and to avoid fading out. Acted, you need to take action immediately. That's why this is a super simple action. Right? We want to act and not overthink it. You are experimenting so that you can use the results as feedback. Rewarded. Celebrate or reward yourself for putting in the work. This will reinforce the behavior of action instead of freezing. And lastly, kept. You remember how in Acted, I mentioned that these are all tiny experiments to give you feedback. Well, here is where you take those results and you keep what works and throw out what doesn't. This spark loop will help you build your ladder of failure. Each rung may not be perfect and some will fall off, but by building them closer together, utilizing tiny experiments, the fall will not hurt as much if it doesn't work out. I would almost say this would equate to stepping on a Lego in bare feet versus Wile E. Coyote falling off a cliff and hitting the ground. So that's it. We look back, we celebrate the progress, and we lean into the unknown with an open heart. This week's challenge, I want you to tackle something you've been putting off for a while. Create your spark cycle and identify that simple action that can ignite your rocket fuel. If you've enjoyed this episode, hit that subscribe button and please leave a comment or review. And if you're feeling feisty, go leave a 5-star rating on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, or anywhere you listen to your podcasts. Ratings, comments, and shares are all forms of showing love, not just to me, but to others, because together we can spread our good vibes on people's bad days. I'm Brian Walsh, your guide to habit crafting and your biggest champion. Thanks for tuning in to Bad Day Excellence. See you next time.